Many thanks for joining me on Global News and Zoom Nigeria. We begin with North Korea fires missiles amid Blinken's Seoul trip. Putin celebrates win in disputed poll. UNICEF says more than 1,300 Gaza kids slain, others malnourished. Netanyahu's reply deepens U.S.-Israeli divide, and Biden jests on Trump's mental health at DC dinner. Officials have said North Korea fired short-range ballistic missiles towards its eastern waters as United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken gets ready to open a democracy summit in neighboring South Korea. North Korea fired an unspecified ballistic missile toward the East Sea, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Monday, referring to the body of water also known as the Sea of Japan. Japan's Coast Guard, who confirmed the launches, said the objects appeared to have already fallen. The launches come days after the U.S. and South Korea completed 11 days of so-called Freedom Shield joint military drills. North Korea has long criticized the joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises, calling them rehearsals for an invasion. Earlier this month, Pyongyang cautioned that Seoul and Washington will pay a dire price for this year's Freedom Shield drills, which involved twice as many troops as last year. Almost 27,000 U.S. soldiers are stationed in South Korea, where the exercises took place. North Korea's test on Monday was the newest in a series of weapons demonstrations this year, including a missile tipped with a maneuverable hypersonic warhead on January 14th. Shortly after the missile launches, Blinken and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol took to the stage at the opening of the Summit for Democracy, which is this year being hosted by South Korea. Both Blinken and Yoon spoke about how technology could be used to encourage democracy, but also to undermine it. Blinken's comments came after the U.S. House of Representatives last week passed a bill that could see the popular social media app TikTok, which is owned by Chinese developer ByteDance, barred. The Democracy Summit, an initiative of U.S. President Joe Biden, has drawn criticism in past years due to its selective invitation list, with countries including Thailand and Turkey reportedly omitted. On elections in Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin has solidified his grip on power in a landslide victory election that has been widely condemned as lacking democracy legitimacy. In a post-election news conference, Putin cast the outcome as a vindication of his new decision to defy the West and invade Ukraine. Putin said in an address from his campaign headquarters early on Monday morning that no matter how or how much they want to intimidate us, no matter who or how much they want to suppress us, our will, our consciousness, no one has ever succeeded in anything like this in history. Shortly after the last polls finished on Sunday, early returns pointed to the conclusion everyone anticipated that Putin will extend his nearly quarter-century rule for 6 more years. According to Russia's Central Election Commission, he had some 87% of the vote, with about 60% of precincts counted. The result means Putin, 71, will overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader in over 200 years. Early results suggested that communist candidate Nikolai Kharitonov came second with just under 4%, newcomer Vladislav Davydenko third, and ultra-nationalist Leonid Slutsky fourth. Nationwide turnout was 74.22% when elections closed. Polls officials said, beating 2018 levels of 67.5%. Putin's victory was never in doubt, as his critics are mostly in jail, in exile, or dead, while public criticism of his leadership has been silent. Last month, the Russian leader's most prominent rival, Alexei Navalny, died in an Arctic prison. For Putin, a former KGB lieutenant colonel who first rose to power in 1999, the result is planned to underscore to the West that its leaders will have to reckon with a blustered Russia, whether in war or in peace, for numerous more years to come. The United States said the vote was neither free nor fair. The White House National Security Council spokesperson said the elections are obviously not free nor fair, given how Putin has imprisoned political opponents and prevented others from running against him. The vote was what free and fair elections look like, United Kingdom Foreign Secretary David Cameron said in a post on X. In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky said this election fraud has no legitimacy and cannot have any. The election came over 2 years after Putin's February 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II. On Sunday, thousands of Putin's opponents staged protests against him on Sunday, although there was no independent tally of how many of Russia's 114 million voters took part in the protests. Putin was first nominated as acting president when former Russian President Boris Yeltsin resigned. He then won his first presidential election in March 2000 and a second term in 2004. After 2 stretches as president, Putin switched back to being prime minister in 2008 to circumvent a constitutional bar on holding power over 2 consecutive terms as head of state. But he returned to the presidency in 2012 and won a 4th term in 2018. Now on Israel-Gaza conflict, the United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF says Israel has killed over 13,000 children in Gaza since October 7th, while others are suffering from acute malnutrition and do not even have the energy to cry, says UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell. On Sunday, there were very great bureaucratic challenges moving trucks into Gaza for aid and assistance as famine stalks more than 2 million Palestinians since Israel's genocidal war began, Russell said. Moreover, according to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 in northern Gaza is now acutely malnourished. The agency also warned that famine is looming in the besieged enclave, facing relentless Israeli bombing for more than 5 months. International condemnation has grown on Israel due to the death toll of the war, the starvation crunch in Gaza, and allegations of blocking aid deliveries into the enclave. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday reiterated his threat of a ground assault on Rafah, the town bordering Egypt, where more than 1 million Palestinians have taken refuge. According to Gaza's health ministry, since October 7th, Israel's military campaign has killed at least 31,645 Palestinians in Gaza, mostly women and children, and displaced nearly 2 million of its residents. The Israeli operation has also led to accusations of genocide being probed at the United Nations International Court of Justice, ICJ. Israel has continually denied the genocide charges and emphasized that it is acting in self-defense after the October 7th attack by Hamas that it says killed over 1,130 people and took over 200 as captive. Still on Gaza-Israel conflicts, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, is declining to bow to calls by the top U.S. senator for a fresh election and pushing back against White House warnings about a potential new offensive in Gaza, broadening a rift with top Democrats in Washington. An extraordinary turn in U.S.-Israel ties in recent days is coinciding with strong diplomacy targeted at securing a ceasefire in Israel's war with Hamas and the release of hostages as the conflict extends bitter divides in U.S. politics. But the gulf in trust and goals between Israel and Hamas has thwarted hopes for a breakthrough for weeks. Netanyahu's defiance shone through an interview on Sunday, 3 days after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Jewish American in the U.S. government, said that a new Israeli government was required to rearrange war strategy and that Netanyahu was an obstacle to peace. Netanyahu said on State of the Union, it's inappropriate to go to a sister democracy and try to replace the elected leadership there. That's something that Israel, the Israeli public, does on its own, and we are not a banana republic. Adding that the majority of Israelis support the policies of my government. It's not a fringe government. It represents the policies supported by the majority of the people. If Senator Schumer opposes these policies, he's not opposing me. He's opposing the people of Israel. Despite the Israeli Prime Minister's stand, there is growing condemnation of his approach in the U.S. and overseas at a time when his opposition among some Israeli voters is fragile, 5 months after terror attacks that tainted his brand as the country's ultimate security guarantor. On Saturday night, thousands of protesters filled the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in two separate groups, one calling for the government to resign and others demanding the release of the hostages in Gaza. Despite a fearsome onslaught in Gaza, Hamas is far from defeated. Scores of Israeli hostages remain missing or unaccounted for. The huge death toll among Palestinians has hardened much of the outside world against Israel's actions and squandered early sympathy after the October 7 terror attacks. And there is no clear plan for how to rebuild or administer Gaza, site of a humanitarian nightmare after any eventual Hamas defeat. The heated rhetoric flying between Washington and Jerusalem raises fundamental questions about the future of the U.S.-Israeli ties. It also underscores the hyper-politicization of Israeli policies in Washington as Republicans line up to castigate Carter and accuse Democratic leaders of snubbing an ally in wartime. The tensions are even more extreme since some senior Democrats wonder whether Netanyahu is keen to keep the war going to postpone an election that could oust him. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's support for Israel's right to defend itself threatens his own coalition ahead of his re-election bid in November, with progressive and younger voters upset over his handling of the war. Biden and Netanyahu, therefore, are being driven further apart by their own competing political imperatives. Away from Israel-Gaza war, now on U.S. 2024 elections, Joe Biden, U.S. President, has joked about ex-President Donald Trump's mental fitness during a speech at the Gridiron Club dinner, a Washington tradition that started in the 1880s. One candidate is too old and mentally unfit to be president. The other one is me, Biden said on Saturday in front of over 650 guests who included the Taoiseach of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, Amazon founder and Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos, and TikTok CEO Shou Zi Chew, whose U.S. business could be barred by Biden. Trump's campaign did not react, though the 77-year-old Republican leader has also questioned Biden's mental capacity to be president. The Democratic leader has deflected ongoing condemnation that his memory is hazy and he appears confused. It was the first time Biden had attended the traditional dinner during his presidency and comes as the 2024 election emerges and the November rematch between Biden and Trump heats up. Biden's appearance at the dinner, in which politicians and journalists trade humorous barbs in a white-tie formal affair, was the first time a president has attended in person since Trump himself came in 2018. Biden strengthened the significance of the press, which he said is not the enemy of the people, in unambiguous contrast to former remarks by Trump about the news media. He also spoke about the war in Ukraine with Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who attended Saturday's dinner. We will not bow down, the Ukrainians will not bow down, and we will not bow down, Biden said. Michigan Governor Christian Whiteman, representing the Democratic Party at the event, also spoke, as well as Utah Governor Spencer Cox, representing the Republican Party. Cox, 48, joked that he was announcing his candidacy for the presidency in 2052, when I still will be younger than both President Biden and President Trump. On more stories now, EU pledges $8 billion to Egypt for migrant control. The European Union has announced a 7.4 billion euro, that's $8.06 billion aid package and upgraded ties with Egypt, part of a fresh deal to stem migrant flows to Europe that has been criticized by right groups. The deal is planned to be signed during a visit on Sunday by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and leaders of Belgium, Italy, Austria, Cyprus and Greece, according to officials. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met separately with von der Leyen and other European leaders before the signing ceremony. The aid package includes both grants and loans over the next 3 years, with the EU saying it is upgrading its relationship with the Arab world's most populous country to a strategic partner. The proposed funding includes 5 billion euros, $5.45 billion in concessional loans, and 1.8 billion euros, $1.96 billion of investments, according to a summary of the plan published by the European Union. An additional 600 million euros, 654 million US dollars will be provided in grants, including 200 million euros, 280 million US dollars for managing migration issues. In a statement, El-Sisi's office said the deal with the EU aims to achieve a significant leap in cooperation and coordination between the two sides and to achieve common interests. Egypt's economic uncertainty has pushed many to migrate from the Arab nation, with Europe interested in curbing migration from Egypt and elsewhere in North Africa. But European governments are concerned about the fallout from rising instability in Egypt, which has been battling to raise foreign currency and has inflation running close to record highs. However, earlier this month, the country struck a record deal for Emirati investment, expanded its loan program with the International Monetary Fund (IMF), and sharply devalued its currency. Congo revives death penalty after 20 years. According to a Justice Ministry statement released on Friday, Congo has lifted an over 2-decade-old suspension on the death penalty as authorities battle to curb violence and militant attacks in the country. The statement, dated earlier this week, said the ban from 2003 let offenders accused of treason and espionage to get away without proper punishment. Eastern Congo has been damaged by conflict for decades, connected to over 120 armed groups fighting for land and power, and in some cases defending their communities. The government said the violence in the east has plagued the country with recurring conflict and resulted in a rise of attacks that have spread terror among the communities. The M23 rebel group, the most dominant in the region, with alleged connections to neighboring Rwanda in recent years, has continued to attack villages, forcing many to flee to Goma, the region's largest city. M23 has laid siege to many communities, with about half of North Kivu province under its control. The violence in the province has deteriorated in recent weeks as security forces battle the rebels. Residents have said the group's fight mostly launch attacks with bombs out of hills overlooking remote towns. The Justice Ministry, in its statement, said capital punishment will be reserved for offenders involved in criminal conspiracies, armed gangs, insurrection, and also those who commit treason and war crimes. It will also be applied to the military, including those who rebel or desert and join enemy ranks. Rights groups have condemned the decision, calling it a step back for the country. Jean-Claude Katende, president of the African Association for Human Rights, said this initiative is against the constitution. We don't think that capital punishment and the execution of the sentence are appropriate measures to restore order. Still on Africa, U.S. rift with ex-ally in African crisis deepens. Diplomatic and military ties between the United States and the West African nation of Niger hit at the latest low this weekend. A spokesman for the Niger's junta in a statement said on Saturday the U.S. military presence in the country is no longer justified. The announcement followed high-level talks with U.S. diplomatic and military officials this week. Niger plays a central role in the U.S. military's operations in Africa's Sahel region and is home to a major air base. The U.S. is concerned about the spread of jihadist violence in the region, where local groups have pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State extremist groups. The junta spokesman, Colonel Maj Amadou Abdurrahman, in reading the statement, stopped short of saying U.S. forces should leave. He said Niger was halting military cooperation with Washington and added that U.S. flights over the country's territory in recent weeks were illegal. The U.S. military in recent years started operating a major air base in the Niger city of Agadez, some 920 kilometers, 550 miles from the capital of Niamey, using it for manned and unmanned surveillance flights and other operations. The U.S. has also invested for years hundreds of millions of dollars in training Niger's military. Some of those forces were involved in the July overthrow of Niger's democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum. In October, Washington formally designated the military takeover as a coup, which took to U.S. laws restricting the military support and aid that it can provide to Niger. But in December, the top U.S. envoy for Africa, Molifi, said the U.S. was willing to restore aid and security ties if Niger met certain conditions. The Nigerian junta spokesman said the U.S. tone was condescending and threatened Niger's sovereignty. Since the July coup, the country has ended its security partnership with the European Union, and France has withdrawn its troops from the country. Field and Marine General Michael Langley, head of the U.S. Military African Command, were in Niamey this week to meet with senior Niger government officials. Field did not respond to email requests for comment, but the U.S. military had some 650 personnel working in Niger in December, according to a White House report to Congress. In part 2, I'll bring you more stories from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. You're welcome back. Now more stories from Nigeria on insecurity. Tinubu Senate order hunt for killers of Delta soldiers. On Sunday, President Bola Tinubu and the Senate ordered the military to arrest the killers of 16 Nigerian army personnel who were on a peace mission to the Akoma community in the Ughelli South local government area of Delta State. In carrying out the order, it was gathered on Sunday that the military searched the belligerent communities and apprehended a lot of persons, including 3 prime suspects, as the president declared that the defense headquarters and the defense chief had full authority to bring anybody responsible to justice. Retired army generals and civil society organizations also criticized the killers of the soldiers and called for their apprehension and speedy prosecution in order to serve as a warning to other criminal elements. On Friday, several residents of Okwama in the Ughelli South local government area and Okolaba in the Bomadi local government area of Delta State fled the communities as soldiers took over the area after the killing of the army personnel. Mutilated bodies of the soldiers were recovered by the Joint Task Force under the supervision of the General Officer Commanding 6th Division, Nigerian Army, Major General Jamal Abdulsalam at the Akoma community. On Thursday, March 14th, 2024, 1 commanding officer, 2 majors, 1 captain, 12 soldiers, and 1 civilian lost their lives in the ambush. The neighboring communities have been engaged in a communal land dispute since January 27th, 2024, when some youths from Okoloba were said to have ambushed and killed 3 Okwama youths, Igoro Mishak, God's Power Awusa, and Okemute Agbabuleke, over an age-long land dispute in the area as they were returning from Okwagbe. The corpses of the deceased were said to have been hidden by the assailants. On Wednesday, some Okwama youths reportedly ambushed one Anthony Abo, an indigene of Okoloba, and held him hostage. The chairman of the Okoloba community alerted the divisional police officer, Bomadi Police Division, the Joint Task Force, the Department of State Service, and the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. It was learned that the JTF swiftly swung into action and moved to Okoma to rescue the hostage. And finally, on the news, NASU SANU to start 7-day strike on Monday. The Joint Action Committee JAC of the Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions, NASU, and the Senior Staff Association of Nigeria University, SANU, has instructed its members to begin a 7-day warning strike from Monday. The directive showed that there will be total blackout in all the universities' water treatment plants and clinics will be shut down, while those involved in the proposed matriculations in some universities are to stay away from any activities. Remember that President Bola Tinubu had recently ordered that university workers that were on prolonged strike in 2022 and their salary stopped by the Muhammadu Buhari's administration after the invocation of no work, no pay policy should be paid 4 months of the withheld salaries. While ASU, the Academic Staff Union of Universities members, have since been paid, the non-teaching staff, including SANU, NASU, and the National Association of Academic Technologies, NAT, are yet to receive any payment. To express their dismay, SANU and NASU, through JAC, issued an ultimatum to the government, but the ultimatum expired without any action from the government. The 2 unions thereafter gave a 7-day warning strike notice to begin on March 18th if the government failed to attend to their demand. JAC of the two unions in a statement on Friday, March 15th, lamented that the government had remained unwavering to the strike notice and therefore directed that the warning strike should commence today. A statement signed by General Secretary of NASU Prince Peters Adeyemi and Comrade Mohammed Ibrahim Sanu Preston explained that all the notices to the relevant government officials have produced no positive results. A recap of major stories says North Korea fires missiles amid Blinken's Seoul trip. Putin celebrates win in disputed poll. UNICEF says more than 1,300 Gaza's kids slain, others malnourished. Netanyahu's reply deepens U.S.-Israeli divide, and Biden just on Trump's mental health at DC dinner. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great week ahead.